Dear colleagues, it's a word. I'm too tall. It's my great honor. Okay, I will just stand like this. It is my great honor to welcome you to this Nordic Side event organized by Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers as well as the Swedish Arts Council, who are currently leading a program on artistic freedom funded by SIDA. For the 16th consecutive year, global freedom is on a decline, and attacks on artistic freedom is continuing to rise. The objective of this side event is therefore twofold. First of all, we need to revitalize the discussion on artistic freedom, how to strengthen it. And secondly, in doing so, we need to bring together a broad range of stakeholders, including policymakers, civil society, to join forces, because it's only by joining forces that we can even begin to understand this issue and also how to solve it. For the next 60 minutes, you will hear the Nordic ministers discuss concrete tools policymakers can use to allow the arts to develop freely. Thereafter, we will move to an expert panel with representatives from civil society, and we will end this session with a Q&A. The event will be moderated by Ms. Dorine Dubois, Chief of the Executive Office at UNESCO's Culture Sector, responsible for the overall program design and management, and also leading the development of strategic partnership, as well as the contribution of UNESCO to international agendas. Without further ado, time has come to introduce the distinguished Assistant Director General for Culture at UNESCO, Mr. Ernesto Torne, ADG since 2018. Prior to this, he held the office of Minister of Culture, Arts and Heritage in Chile between 2015 and 2018, and needless to say, has had a very strong personal engagement in this question throughout his career. So it's my great honor to welcome you up on stage.
So, first, Your Excellency, Miss Annette, Trettensburger Bergstuen, I don't know the name, actually. I speak German, but not any other language from North. Minister of Culture and Equality of Norway. Your Excellency, Mr. Tuomo Puomala, Vice Minister of Education and Culture of Finland, Ms. Ann Winken, Director of the International Secretariat of the Ministry of Culture of Sweden. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first, it is, and I mean it is a great pleasure to be with you today, to welcome you to Mondiacult side event, Strengthening Cultural Policy to Promote Artistic Freedom. When we are talking about artistic freedom, it's not only about policies that Minister of Culture is somehow leading in the country. It's also the possibility to give the voice to civil society and creators and workers of the culture sectors to really defend what is the most important in every creation. I would like to thank the government of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden, supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers for the organization of this important session. This once again highlights the deep commitment of Nordic countries to the protection and promotion of artistic freedom worldwide. The session takes place 6 years after the adoption of the Helsinki Declaration, which reaffirmed the centrality of artistic freedom within the broader system of fundamental rights. And during these 2 days, you're going to hear a lot about not only human rights, but about fundamental rights in culture. It is an occasion to reflect on the progress made and the challenges, because there are challenges that remain, in ensuring that artists have the freedom and means to imagine, create, and share their work with the public or the audiences. The 2022 UNESCO Global Report Reshaping Policy for Creativity found that threats and attacks on artistic freedom are on the rise around the world, including online and including during the pandemic. Women artists and culture professionals are particularly at the risk from censorship and harassment. These threats are compounded by the fact that artists are often vulnerable, as they face precarious working conditions, low pay, and a lack of social safety nets. Also, there has been progress, and in the reshaping, we can share those progress. For instance, through the passing of Statute of Artists laws, much works remain. And I'm so happy to have, in the last 3 days, I had many bilateral meetings with countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And to see how many countries have passed new laws on revising the status of artists, not only in the environment, in the digital sphere, but also giving better condition and legislation that helps artists to be dignified in what they do for the society. So, artistic freedom is essential for cultural expression and the bedrock of open, democratic, and inclusive societies. This is why artistic freedom is at the very heart of UNESCO's mandate, as you know, embodied by the 2005 Convention, as well as in the 80 recommendation concerning the status of the artist. The UNESCO Ashback program, that is generously supported by Norway, by the government of the Kingdom of Norway, offers vital technical assistance to government and civil societies organizations to improve regulatory frameworks for the protection and promotion of artistic freedom. This year we have 12 new projects that were financed, and we really hope to do the follow-up of those projects. Many of those who in more than or less than 1 year will be able to show some results at national level and some of the projects at regional level. Last June, UNESCO launched a global survey on the implementation of the 80 recommendation, and I will use this opportunity to encourage all the countries and ministries of culture and civil society, because that's some of the big issues, that it's about institution, but also civil society, who has to put and contribute to this important process. We need reliable and update information to take stock of global trends, identify common challenges, and elaborate recommendations for future actions. UNESCO, as you know, stands ready to provide member states and civil society with the support they need to develop effective policies, regulation, and measures to protect artists and unleash the potential of the creative economy. I cannot think of a better setting than Mondiacult to have this opportunity and this discussion. So I will leave you to have reflection that can help us for the future to make and give more opportunity to artists in our society that is in need of having creativity, diversity, and freedom. Thank you so much, and thank you to be part of this great invitation. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Otone, ADG Culture of UNESCO, for your inspiring words. It is now our turn, my turn to introduce you to this ministerial panel discussion. I would like to introduce our panel members. First, Her Excellency, Ms. Annette Trete Bajstuen, Minister of Culture and Equality of Norway. Then His Excellency, Vice Minister of Education and Culture, Mr. Tuomo Pumala. And thank you also for the participation of the Director of the International Secretariat of the Minister of Culture for Sweden. So thank you very much, and welcoming, our panelists. So we are now going to talk about policies, about culture, policies to contribute to artistic freedom, We would like to hear from your respective point of views about, the concrete tools that can help, promote artistic freedom, and perhaps also maybe you will want to share some challenges and how, you can, contribute to face actually the difficulties on the ground in your respective countries. So, Your Excellency, Ms. Annette.
Should I sit or?
As you wish, as you wish. You have a microphone here, or you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Thank all of you for coming, and thank you for the participation, and thank you for letting the Nordic governments be given the opportunity to hold this side event with the support of the Nordic Council of Ministers. And this is a really important topic, and a topic that is really close to my heart. The right to speak your mind freely and the right to create and express yourself artistically are fundamental principles and a core human right. In Norway recently, we have had a government-appointed commission that reviewed the conditions of freedom of speech and artistic expression in Norway today. And that's a quite interesting report that they came out with in August. And the surveys confirm that, of course, free expressions hold a strong position in our society. They are protected by law and highly regarded as core values, as they are. However, that's not, of course, not the whole picture. There are reasons for grave concern worldwide, also in the Nordic countries and in Norway. The huge technological shift has led to a massive democratization of the opportunities for freedom of expression, as you all know. But at the same time, technology has brought on new challenges. Hate speech, fake news, disinformation are spread rapidly online. Vulnerable minorities are especially subjected to threats and harassments. Artists, cultural workers, and cultural institutions also face harsh and also often toxic climate online. We see this in all our countries. From a Norwegian point of view, we don't think that sanctions or prohibitions are the right answer to this challenge. We believe a better way is to actively support and secure the free editorial media. We must strengthen the resilience of the people by increasing digital competence and media literacy. And together, in the Nordic countries, and hopefully with the rest of the world, we need to regulate the big tech companies wisely. The Norwegian Constitution states that the authorities of the state shall create conditions that facilitate open and enlightened public discourse. And I believe that a well-developed and broadly accessible infrastructure for art and culture is essential. Facilitating fair and responsible conditions for artists and cultural workers is important. Their rights must be secured. This year, Norway holds the presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers. The support of artistic and media freedom in an international context is a clear ambition and one of our main tasks for this year. We fear that oppression of artistic freedom is gravely underreported. We know that expression of religion can pose extreme threats. We know that in many societies, artists and their works are targets of discrimination. I'm also so sad to see that in some areas, freedom of expression is under siege, even in countries we normally consider flag bearers of human rights. I think that when it comes to what we can do to secure the fundamental freedom of expression, fundamental freedom of artistic freedom and freedom to express yourself in an artistic way, of course, the laws is important. The laws are also bearer of values, but it's also important to secure a core and strong economical funding for the free culture. You need to secure institutions that are free to express and to program their exhibitions in the way that they want. In Norway, we have an expression that says that we have an arm length of distance from the decision makers through the Art Council to the artists. And that's a really, really important principle that we need to secure. Art and artists should not be fearing governments. They should not be facing the threat of government sanctions or losing funding. We know that in a climate like this, artists will begin to censor themselves, and then we end up in a situation where the arts is no longer free. Now I look forward to hearing your thoughts on how to secure freedom of expression and artistic freedom worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. Indeed, we heard about the digital environment as being an opportunity, but also a challenge. And indeed, maybe in your functions, Your Excellency, Mr. Pumala, maybe with your functions, your responsibilities in the field of education and culture, maybe you would like to share your experience.
Thank you, Madame Dubois, for the introduction. Distinguished Mr. Ottone, dear colleagues and panelists. I'm truly honored to speak at this event. For me to talk about artistic freedom is essentially to talk about human rights. It encompasses freedom of expression and the right to participate in the cultural life of the community and to enjoy the arts. Consequently, the protection of these rights is paramount to any cultural policy. As the arts and the culture themselves, the paradigm of cultural expression is dynamic and changing. Digitalization, while providing new platforms for creative expression and cultural participation, also challenges the diversity of cultural expression. Digital platforms can be used to build communities, but also to dismantle them. They are essential to the circulation of content in the digital era and can promote the visibility of the variety of content. However, new operating models and partnerships are required to ensure the diversity of content and the development of well-functioning ecosystems for the cultural and creative industries. The dismantling of communities often takes on a cultural form as values, identities, and history are questioned for political purposes. The endless supply of content, in fact, can distort artistic freedom to other ends. The core of the matter, culture, also provides an answer. Dear friends, participation in culture has proven to strengthen democratic attitudes. Participation starts with cultural expression stemming from artistic freedom. Hence, cultural policies need to ensure the freedom of artistic work, as well as provide support to the ecosystem sustaining professional artists. Moreover, we need to consider how to ensure that individuals from all backgrounds and all genders have the opportunity to pursue a career in the arts. Besides artistic work, we need to consider the means of cultural policy to ensure that all citizens have the opportunity to participate and enjoy culture. Public support to cultural organization is an investment in community. In the digital environment, instruments to overcome digital gaps and to support the diversity of cultural expression and content are key. As we move towards the post-2030 agenda, culture's contribution to identity and community building must be harnessed. The transition into a more sustainable way of life will fundamentally affect every one of us. We need culture's contribution to democracy to mediate this transition and to leverage the development for a sustainable tomorrow. through cultural policy making, we support the culture that supports us. This, in turn, supports the global community we need to sustain democratic and human rights-based societies. With these words, let us strengthen our cultural policies for artistic freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've heard your call, your clear call to build on the role of culture for sustainable development, to create the enabling environment to protect actually our rights and promote artistic freedom. So thank you very much. Anna Wigner, maybe you would like to talk about the long-standing commitment of Sweden for artistic freedom and to build on the role of civil society. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Doreen. Distinguished ministers and excellencies and dear colleagues. And as been mentioned by the Minister for Norway and the State Secretary of Finland, the Nordics have a long-standing engagement in promoting freedom of expression and the diversity of cultural expression. We continue to raise this issue as it's fundamental in any democratic society. This has become increasingly important as we find ourselves in a world where the global freedom for the 16th consecutive year was on the decline last year. We can never take artistic freedom for granted. We must protect and cherish artistic freedom everywhere, always. And this is true in all countries, also in countries like Sweden, where I think we stand at a good place, but this is a continuous process we need to work on. In order to do this, I think we need data. We need to have facts and good information. It's essential when we create societies where artists and writers can work freely without intervention, censorship, or persecution from governments or others. As I said, we need data, and I think that is why the UNESCO global report Reshaping Policies for Creativity is so important. It's the only global report that provides an overview of cultural development worldwide. At the same time, it monitors state action to protect and promote the diversity of cultural expressions. Decisions based on data is key for more informed, participatory and transparent governance for culture and creative sectors. This is the reason why Sweden continues to support this global UNESCO report. Well, when the world looks like it does, and there is a need to offer safe havens for writers and artists, one way to do is to do it through cities of refuge. And I'm very proud that Sweden has the most cities of refuge in the world. I'm also pleased that the Arts Council and the Swedish International Development Corporation, SIDA, have recently partnered in supporting a program for artistic freedom globally, working with other partner organizations worldwide, also in the global south. And cities of refuge is not only a way to help out, it's also an opportunity to experience and learn from the diversity of artistic expression and creativity that comes with offering this protection. And I think what was mentioned before as well, as of course that one other aspect of artistic freedom is the conditions for artists, the economic and social conditions for artists, that they can work on fair conditions. And remunerating artists at arm's length distance, we use the same expression as Norway, arm's length distance from politics and without any requirements to reach an audience is very important. And I think, Doreen, you were asking about challenges, and in Sweden, actually, the Agency for Cultural Policy analysis did a report last year when they concluded that there is a perception among some artists and some actors that it's not really free, and that some of the horizontal issues that, of course, are very important, like gender equality, inclusiveness, and other ways, were also governing who got the funds. That is not, of course, true, but still there was a perception. And in order to clarify that that is not anything that should govern who should get support, the government last year made some changes in the letter of appropriations to the relevant agencies. Another part is, of course, the social insurance system, and here I think the COVID pandemic made it even more apparent how important it is to have social security systems that make it possible to be an artist, to be a cultural worker. And the government has also commissioned a public inquiry on sickness benefit qualification income, an inquiry that will be reported next year. So we will see what that will lead to. Then civil society. A strengthened and meaningful collaboration with civil society is crucial and important when developing cultural policies. First of all, of course, the diversity of voices is needed to pose new questions, to come up with new solutions. A free and vibrant cultural life is a prerequisite for a sustainable democracy, and vice versa. To safeguard democracy and strengthen the respect for human rights is a concern for all of us. And I think also the other aspect of the importance of including the civil society is also referring to the importance of data. I think it's very important to meet with actually the people who are involved. They know a lot. They have a lot of data, information, and experiences that decision makers need to make the most informed decisions, and also, of course, to have transparent and participatory processes. And I think in Sweden, already in the first government bill on cultural policy back in the 70s, the role of the civil society was recognized. And it has been further amplified, I think, through the years. 10 years ago, we had a new way of allocation state aid to regional cultural activities. And then the role of civil society in that process was even more highlighted. And I would also say, besides this, the importance of the dialogue and exchange with the civil society, another aspect is, of course, that the civil society get financial support. And most state aid schemes in the cultural field in Sweden are also open for civil society organizations. Also within the UNESCO work, Sweden wants to stress the importance of including civil society actors. This involves to further clarify and simplify the processes and the possibilities for civil society actors to participate and contribute to the work. Agenda 2030 cannot be realized without active partnership and collaboration with civil society. And this is why I'm very eager today also to hear from the next panel of experts shortly about the challenges and opportunities they, as civil society and artists, identifies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very inspiring indeed, because we can believe that we need culture, we need artistic freedom, but it's not enough. It's not enough to believe in it. We need data, we need investments, we need support systems, and we need a close dialogue with civil society. Governments cannot do it alone, do they? So maybe I'm afraid that due to time limits, and we will have to now go through, the other panel. But unless I'm allowed to take some questions, but maybe we can take some questions afterwards. So thank you again. Thank you again for your interventions and for sharing your ideas and experience. Okay. Maybe I can now call, next panelist to join me on stage. Can I call? Yes, thank you very much. So, Tanya Bruguera, Denise Dora, please take the seats. It's free. I think we're free here on this, in this room. And by the way, of course, we have an audience here, very expert one, but we also have an audience who is following online. So thank you, Tanya, Denise, and Lucy also. Thank you. So maybe I will make a short introduction, and then we'll be eager to hear from your experience. Tanya Bruguera, you're an artist, an activist. I think we can call you an activist maybe first. Denise Dora, you're a lawyer, but a human rights expert. I think this can qualify, the overall an overview for your work. And Lucy Lado, thank you very much. You work for CELAM, this organization, and you have a strong network of experts on the African continent. So maybe you will talk about this. So maybe, without further ado, Tanya, would you like to share some words with us and maybe a bit more?
Yeah, since we don't. Hello. Since we don't have a lot of time, I wrote everything to be on time. First of all, I would like to thank the UNESCO and also the Swedish delegation and the ministers of culture that are here today present for the invitation to speak. I would like, first of all, to show you the last meeting Cuban artists had, independent Cuban artists had with the Minister of Culture in the following video.
So we have a video. Thank you.
Oye, ¿qué pasó?
No hable más. ¿Por qué? Porque no me da la gana, no hable más. Pues ahí, vas a hablar, habla. ¡Habla! No hable más.
The Cuban government representatives always say that they do not know that Cuban artists are in prison, nor about any repression to artists in the island or citizens by the state security forces. What we just saw, they actually defend themselves as saying that the activists are lying or paid by foreigner agencies. What we just saw was the arrival of artists to a pre-arranged meeting to talk to the Minister of Culture of Cuba that only happened after around 600 artists and intellectuals stayed for a whole day in front of their office a few months earlier. We had been asked for years to have a meeting to talk about the repression to artists in Cuba with the authorities, something the minister always denied existed. The area was surrounded by police when the artists arrived and state security agents. A slap that the minister gave to take the phone of one artist that was also functioning as a journalist who was recording was a gesture recognized by the police surrounding them as an order to take the artist into detention. The sound we heard was the secret recording inside the bus when the artists were transported. The Minister of Culture just looked at it. He did nothing to stop it. He actually started it. Now at least he can deny the violence exists. After this, artists organized and requested his resignation by addressing the National Assembly petition system. Not only we are still waiting for an answer, but the minister was fiercely defended by the president. This is why I said yes to this invitation, because we have no place to go in Cuba to ask for our rights, because I seek solidarity with the Cubans who today are in prison just for saying the word freedom in the streets, which is actually their constitutional right under the new constitution. We feel helpless. We have exhausted all legal and peaceful activist ways to be heard with no response from the Cuban government other than violence and repression. I would have preferred not to be here, to be honest. I want to be at my studio doing my artwork. But I cannot remain indifferent when my colleagues are in prison or, like myself, expelled from the country. Artists are supposed to reflect the time they're living in. For that, in Cuba, you can be jailed. How can you have culture when in 1 year more than 250,000 people flee the country because of fear? Cuba is living a culture of terror. How can you do art or have culture under these conditions? Is art even an option? Avenues like this one, where we are today, are great opportunity for us to be listened as testimony. I also think we need to find a way where governments are not protected if their citizens are vulnerable. To stop the double censorship that we have today, because foreign corporations, agencies, and organizations like UNESCO do not only work and support governments, do not only support work done by governments or artists and projects vetted by the government, but also to support independent cultural projects and artists, and also civic society. We would like these agencies and UNESCO not only giving access to the resources, not giving access to these resources to artists and civic societies, limiting the opportunity for counter-narratives to exist, having as a result a monolithic idea of culture designed by governments and not by the artists and the people. This also puts artists that already are risking a lot in order to do an honest artwork or bring a different perspective on culture in a precarious situation. And it educates younger people into stopping defending their ideas on culture and politics, because the only result will be their isolation from everything and everywhere. Increase their fear to be reduced to nothing. When you solely collaborate with governments, you become instruments of censorship. The solution to defending difference cannot be that everyone that thinks different becomes an exile. For example, there is the IFCD, I did a little homework, International Fund for Cultural Diversity. I encourage them to expand their support into independent artists, especially in countries like Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, where there is a decree called 349 limiting the independence of art, and the decree 370 condemning people to unpayable fees or to go to prison for expressing their opinion or show documentation of violation like this one that I show you today in the internet. We have several people in prison just for putting videos on the internet, like this one. Independent artists and civic society, we cannot participate in any of the events sponsored by UNESCO in Cuba. I would personally not be able maybe to go out of my house if they knew I was going to be part of that event. To compare, just to give you an example, I have my artwork in the collection of the National Museum of Cuba, but I cannot enter the institution. Now imagine us trying to enter a UNESCO event in Cuba. Impossible. They won't let us even leave the house. And in even more difficult situation are the independent journalists in Cuba. For example, El Toque, an independent journalist platform seen as a moderate space, had in the last 21 days, 20 journalists leaving the project because of the pressure and threats of the state security police. How can we have culture if there is no alternative to state propaganda materials? Many of them were recently graduates from universities. Today we live, the life at university in Cuba is unacceptable. Students are expelled for writing things like socialism, yes, repression, no. So not even the people who are in the same ideological position than the government can have a space to protest, to suggest, to whisper. Or you have professors expelled for publishing a paper in an independent magazine or for asking the wrong question in class. I invite you to visit the website of Observatorio de Libertad Académica, where they registered violation of freedom of expression in academia in Cuba. In the meantime, a year ago, a high-ranking military member dressed, quote unquote, as a professor, embedded by the government as a respected academic, is invited to an international academic congress to present the truth, quote unquote, of what happens in Cuba as an expert. You should be, I would question myself, who should be the expert for institutions like UNESCO? The person that creates an institute, censorship and violence, or the people who receive it? Who has the right to generate culture? Who has access to places where the definition of present history is decided? There is an alarming tendency to authoritarianism in the world. The complicity with the minor problems, so it's not being seen, or let's do it later, is actually seen as weakness by these totalitarian people. And those candidates are actually using that, looking the other side, as their advantage. We see the signs all the time. We don't need to wait until somebody is in prison or somebody's killed. None of the dictators, the autocrats, the censors want anything recorded. They don't want what they do to be seen in the future. And art is the way to always remember. Let's defend art made by people, not the one that is used, not the use of culture as political propaganda by governments. Because art survives governments. They know it, but also we know it.
A big thank you. A big thank you, really. We feel, and these are real words, we feel honored of your participation. We have understood how important this was for you, for us, for everyone who is following also online. So freedom of expression, artistic freedom, is not a theoretical advocacy. It's about people, it's about our lives, and it's about how we share actually our culture. It's also about, sharing and living actually together. So thank you again, Tanya. Denise Dora,
yes.
Within the framework of your work as a lawyer, you talk to policymakers. We are here in the house of Mondiacult with a lot of policymakers in this room, but in other rooms also at the moment. Maybe you have a message, maybe you would like to share your experience too? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I want to thank you to the Nordic Council of Ministers for the invitation and the UNESCO for this opportunity. I'm a Brazilian lawyer. In the last Article 19 report on freedom of expression, 3 countries have led the backlash on freedom of expression: Hong Kong, Afghanistan, and Brazil. It's surprising, including for us, although we live there, that in so few years Brazil has decreased from a position of a freedom of expression defender to a country that persecutes civic participation, artists, human rights defenders, and all dissonant voices in the country, particularly in the last 4 years under the current federal administration. So as a lawyer and a big fan of artists, and realizing that the way that the government was persecuting and attacking artists in Brazil, we started creating a network of artistic associations like theater directors, players, singers, street artists, to start documenting cases of persecution attack. And this has led to a coalition that is online now, I will share with you. And we have been doing what we can call as a classical human rights work. Started documenting cases, receiving complaints, receiving denouncings, checking the reaction, supporting people to ask for more information, analyzing these cases, following legal cases under Brazilian courts. We also have an important case under the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, We had a hearing with the whole Commission and the Special Rapporteurs on Cultural Rights and Freedom of Expression last December. It's online. About the environment of persecution and criminalization against artists in Brazil, and how this has helped to the erosion of democracy. Artists' voices, artists' space, the creation, the vision of artists about a new future, a new present, or how to symbolize the new moments that are in political terms. It's so important that when we don't have this space, we don't have democracy. And that's what we've seen and what we are living at the moment in the country. So I'm very happy to be here and to raise the attention about what's going on in the country. And what, by now, for example, if you go to the website, you see we have 274 cases well documented in the last 2 years. And we can categorize them in, let's say, 3 main aspects. There is one aspect which is defamation. So public authorities have been saying horrible things about famous artists in order to having their voice reduced, diminished. They also have been breaking contracts with, for example, exhibitions in the day before when people were with all the exhibition done, ready to start, and they had their contracts, then their support break in a way that put people in debt with difficulties and with difficulty even to carry on their work. And the third is pure criminalization, particularly against street artists, Afro-Brazilian artists, LGBT artists, women who are just arrested, tortured, going to prison. We had some cases where people had to move, several people had to move from their houses, some people had to move from the country, and this is not a democracy. Although we have electoral processing on regular basis, democracy is more than elections here and there. We believe that it's super important to consider the freedom of artistic expression as one of the main pillars of lively democracies, of a good world, a peaceful world. And that's what we are trying to raise, defend, and contribute in Brazil. We have presidential elections this Sunday, next Sunday, so we hope we will be able also, as a big coalition of artists, human rights lawyers, the human rights community, to build new policies in the country in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We need societies that are protected. We need this for democracies, countries to actually fulfill themselves and protect, artistic freedom. So thank you very much. Lucy Lado, you work for CELAM, an international arts organization based in Sweden, but I think there are a number of offices on the African continent. Maybe you would like to share your experience. Yes, of course, please. You have the floor.
Difficult to hold the mic and speak at the same time. All protocols observed. Thank you so much for this invitation. We do not have platforms like this on the continent where we get to freely speak about freedom of expression, particularly in the arts. I'm Lucy Lado. I was an arts journalist for 7 years before joining culture development, and I have also been a victim, I would say, of censorship because of my work. Particularly in lobbying and advocating for proper structures in the copyright sector. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart, and I'm very much happy to hear my colleagues speak about the same issues. It's copy and paste everywhere, which means that we can be able to harmonize policies that can be adopted globally. On the 18th of September, a makeup artist from Uganda was arrested. And because he was trying to demonstrate fiction makeup, how they create wounds in movies. And he was arrested by the police. It was at a festival, and they held him for 3 days, and he was released without charges. So these are just some of the petty issues that artists go through because the authorities and the policymakers do not fully understand the need for freedom of expression. So we did launch the Pan-African Network, Freedom of Expression, which is being supported by the Swedish Arts Council.
If you work in it.
Sorry? It's being supported by the Swedish Arts Council. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a regional voice for stakeholders, arts organizations, civil society, to advocate for free expression, to advocate for proper policies and change of legislation in countries where we are experiencing a lot of censorship for artists. So I would briefly just give you the state of freedom of expression at the moment, then I will proceed. The culture markets in Africa presents a mixed bag of threats and opportunities as a result of the context in which international and regional laws that seek to promote artistic freedom, including the right to create without censorship and intimidation, have been domestically implemented. These markets present empirical challenges related to the right to have one artistic work supported, distributed, and remunerated. There's a big threat presented by how the economic and socially cultural rights of artists are being protected. Insecurity also presents a threat to this diversity of artists. The willingness for artists to take artistic rights and fully use their freedom of expression can be linked majorly to a lack of appropriate legal protections, particularly now against hatred and online harassment. Now, what we're trying to build with PANAF is first, we are working from the ground up. And that means we are partnering with local art organizations that have membership that can allow us to map out these artists across different art forms that are fully engaged in this area of artistic freedom. And from there, then we can be able to build a network on a national level and connect it on a regional level. We are also working with partners and the civil society. One of the challenges that artists on the continent experience is lack of legal representation. So when an artist is arrested, they cannot afford to get a lawyer, and in most cases they end up staying in jail for 2 months, a month, without anyone getting to know, because there's no proper mapping. So we are working with local organizations to ensure that we keep tabs of every artist, at least, so that we can always be aware when these violations happen. We are also collecting data. There is a lack of data when it comes to monitoring and documentation, which is very important. It's the best place to start. So presently, we are conducting research until the end of November, when we will be able to fully understand the state of artistic freedom in the 8 focus countries that we're working on, and look at the laws that promote or that support or prevent freedom of expression. And after that, we are going to tailor-make activities and programs that would provide capacity to policy makers and artists so that they can fully be aware of this topic. We are also building a platform. Because of the digital space, a lot of artists are having to censor themselves because when they go online and talk about these issues, then they're putting themselves at risk. They lose their social media accounts or they are arrested. So we are building a platform which will be a safe space for artists to discuss these issues, particularly about democracy and good governance, because we are experiencing a shrinkage of democracy on the continent. I think it's also happening globally. So with this platform, we will not only provide them with a safe space, but we will also be able to publish research papers, educational material, so that the artists can fully understand their role as mirrors of the society. One of the challenges we have on the continent for artists at risk is the lack of emergency funding. So we see a lot of artists at risk. So if they cannot leave the country, they are given an alternative. You have to stop making your artwork. And there's one particular artist who's very notorious. I think the government is always following him from Tanzania. And he has to stop playing music, going to concerts for a while before he can continue with his works. So these are some of the challenges that we wish we can be able to support. These are some of the challenges that we can be able to support artists with, providing them a safe haven, relocation perhaps, or just an alternative to continue to ensure that they continue practicing their art. Finally, like it was mentioned earlier, it's very important to also ensure that artists are empowered economically, because once they're empowered economically, then they can be able to fully participate in other areas of the culture sector. So it's also important to continue advocating for proper structures, particularly in the copyright and the IP areas, so that artists can be able to fully be remunerated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We have heard a lot from a variety of key stakeholders, from policymakers, experiences on the ground, variety of them. Indeed, we've heard about the need for artistic freedom to promote pluralistic societies, I think we can say this, democracies, to promote actually who we are, to protect culture and promote it around the world. I think UNESCO has heard also the need for international cooperation, not only to share, the various experiences across all the continents around the world, but also to share, the various tools and policies that can together, be stronger. This is why we're here gathered today. And hopefully we will manage to reach this common understanding within, amongst all countries around the world of culture as a global public good. So we can achieve, further support investments for culture and artistic freedom in particular. I'm not sure we have the time for questions. Maybe one or two. We can go a bit beyond. Maybe one or two questions. Yes, please. Thank you. Sir.
Very shortly, some of you spoke about harmonization and improved safety also of artists. Is that also a call for UNESCO? Because at the United Nations we have an action plan for the safety of journalists. Would you invite UNESCO to think about an action plan similarly for the safety of artists, for example?
Yes, please. Maybe Tanya or Denise? Yes, Tanya.
Just very quickly, absolutely, because more and more, as we have seen, artists are at risk for doing art that reflect what the people are thinking. But also, at one point, I met with one of the rapporteurs for culture, freedom of expression and cultural rights, and there was this idea that was going around about having, the same way there are civil rights defenders or human rights defenders figures, to have cultural defenders figures. So having people who can also, I don't know, this is an idea that I heard sometime at the UN, and but I think definitely it is very necessary, because at least in the case of Cuba, it's funny because I hear you, and I was like, oh, we are on level 3 already. We passed that a long time ago. So we are like, okay, so when we have to share experiences. But I think there is a situation now where the government, for example, I put a defamation case against the national TV because they were putting my name, my telephone number on the national TV, asking people fake things about me and exciting people to call me and do stuff to me and all the people in the group. And they laugh at me. They laugh at me, And actually, I was very strong and I demanded an answer. And the answer was, I have a frame because it's beautiful. The answer is, we have the right of freedom of expression. That's the government. They do, we don't. So I think absolutely, and please. And what I say that UNESCO's event in Cuba, we cannot go, is not it's real. It's not a joke,
Just adding one point, I think what we've been learning with this coalition of artists and human rights people is that we need to go further in what freedom of artistic expression violation means. We don't know exactly. If we don't start to having data, categorize, understanding the remedies, and the state responsibility, it's still too vague. That's why maybe we don't have international standards for protection of artists as strong as we have for other sectors, because the violations are, still needing more and more work from, as civil society organizations, we believe that, and civil society people, we believe that we need to keep doing this work and asking governments and state and international agencies to be prepared to go to another level of protection of artists in the world.
Thank you, thank you. I have a reply for UNESCO, but I think that maybe this is an opportunity to give the floor to a minister here who may want to provide a response.
Thank you so much. I think it was a kind of a leading question, which has only one answer. That's yes. I think, we must take into consideration that being a journalist and being an artist is two of the most dangerous things you can do for a living at these days. And it's about the same thing. It's about expression. It's about provoking. It's about, letting people know what governments do, etc. At the same time, as you also stated, journalism and journalists are maybe more protected than artists are, because they have more eyes on them and their situation than the artists have. And I think that must be a task for us, and not only the Nordic countries, but the countries under the umbrella of UNESCO, to try to raise the awareness of the danger that many artists, and also you represented here in the panel, are living in every day. And it's about the same thing. We need journalists to protect the truth and to give us the truth, and we need artists to do the same. So the answer is yes, I support that.
Thank you. Maybe another, because we have the honor of having a minister and vice minister staying with us. So maybe you have a word you would like to share?
To put it the long story short, absolutely, yes, of course. I think these three remarkable women have proven the fact that we truly need it. And of course, Finland joins for the call for UNESCO, indeed.
Thank you very much. So the good news is that UNESCO has a culture sector and a communication and information sector. And we have started working with our colleagues from the communication and information sector to actually build some guidelines to protect both, journalists, but also artists at risk. So it's a start. It's a start. So maybe a last question. Maybe a last question, if someone would like to ask a last question. Otherwise, okay. So maybe. Please continue to have this exchange in the corridors, because this international conference is not only about rooms and exchanges, with microphones. It's about exchanges outside, and please do continue. And there are, also the thematic parallel sessions now ministerial already starting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists.